God. Forward. Why understanding God's laws is vital today. In an age where humanity pursues freedom, comfort, and knowledge, the fundamental principles that govern life are often misunderstood, ignored, or misrepresented. Many believe that divine law is restrictive, punitive, or arbitrary. Others confuse human-made rules with the eternal order of creation. The Grail Message illuminates the truth. God's laws are neither oppressive nor contingent. They are the active, unchanging framework of all existence. Ignorance of these laws is the root of human suffering, confusion, and spiritual blindness. To live wisely, to act responsibly, and to navigate life with clarity, humanity must first recognize what the laws truly are. Only through sober comprehension and alignment can one experience the peace, freedom, and inner strength that these laws naturally bring. From human assumption to recognition. Historically, mankind has projected personal opinion, cultural norms, and emotional desire onto the divine order. Laws are misunderstood as punishments, privileges, or arbitrary rules, rather than as precise expressions of creation's immutable order. Recognition is the key. Seeing law for what it truly is, not as a reflection of fear, convenience, or external authority. The Grail Message teaches that each human being has the capacity to recognize law through sober observation, alignment, and self-examination. This book aims to bridge the gap between assumption and recognition, guiding the seeker from misconception toward clarity, from obedience without understanding toward living in conscious alignment with creation. The purpose of this work. The purpose of this book is to provide clarity, distinguishing divine law from human distortion, ritual, or superstition. Correction, helping those already misled by misconceptions to see reality clearly. Enlightenment, showing how recognition of law transforms life, decisions, relationships, and destiny. Practical guidance, offering a framework to live consciously, responsibly, and soberly in accordance with divine law. This work is not merely intellectual. Its goal is active recognition, fostering awareness that can be applied in thought, word, and deed, resulting in true liberation, strength, and inner order. Introduction. Humanity's longing for order and law. Human beings are created to perceive order, harmony, and justice. Even when unaware of divine law, there is an instinctive longing for alignment, structure, and fairness. Misalignment leads to confusion, conflict, and suffering, revealing an inherent awareness of law's existence, even if its nature is misunderstood. The Grail Message reveals that God's laws are the underlying principles of all life. They are impartial, exact, and eternally operative. Recognizing and living in accordance with them brings inner stability, moral clarity, and the ability to navigate life without being enslaved by ignorance or fear. How misconceptions arose. Misunderstandings about God's laws have arisen through religious distortion, emphasizing ritual, tradition, or authority rather than inner recognition. Emotional projection, confusing personal desire, fear, or preference with law. Intellectual misinterpretation, treating law as abstract ideas or rules to be debated rather than experienced and recognized. These distortions have caused humanity to live partially blind to consequences, partially blind to moral responsibility, and often entirely blind to the constancy of divine law. The Grail Message is a key to clear understanding. The Grail Message offers direct guidance to recognition. Law is not punishment, it is the immutable order of creation. Awareness is required to align with law, intellectual assent is insufficient. Consequences flow naturally from alignment or misalignment, not from arbitrary judgment. This book presents a systematic illumination of God's laws, showing how they operate, how humanity has misconceived them, and how living consciously with recognition of law produces freedom, clarity, and true inner strength. It invites the reader to move beyond assumption, habit, and superficial belief, toward living knowledge of divine law, experienced daily through thought, word, and deed. Part 1. Human Misconceptions of God's Laws. Chapter 1. Law as Threat or Fear. Humanity has long misunderstood the nature of God's laws, often perceiving them as threats, punishments, or arbitrary constraints. Many have been taught that law exists primarily to control, judge, or punish, rather than to guide and maintain order in creation. This fear-based approach to law produces anxiety, guilt, and constant tension. Human beings may obey outwardly but remain blind to the true purpose of divine order. Fear, while emotionally compelling, obscures recognition, preventing the individual from understanding law as a neutral, impartial, and exact expression of creation. The Grail Message emphasizes that God is not the punisher, God is the creator of order. Law is not personal judgment, it is the mechanism through which cause and effect manifests consistently. Misunderstanding this creates a world where human beings struggle with guilt and oppression, thinking that divine presence is conditional rather than constant. True recognition of law dispels fear. When humans see that consequences follow naturally from alignment or misalignment, they understand that law is protective, clarifying, and instructive, not punitive. Fear is replaced by respect, vigilance, and conscious alignment. Chapter 2. Law is arbitrary or selective. Many people perceive God's laws as inconsistent, arbitrary, or selectively applied. They observe injustice, inequality, or unexplainable suffering and conclude that the laws are either non-existent or biased. This misunderstanding arises from failing to recognize the cause and effect principle inherent in all creation. The Grail Message teaches that laws operate precisely and impartially. Consequences are exact, but humans often fail to see the full chain of cause and effect. Short-sighted observation leads to the illusion of favoritism or unfairness, when in reality, the law functions consistently, whether humans perceive it or not. Humanity compounds this misunderstanding through comparison, envy, and expectation. People measure outcomes against desire rather than reality, creating illusions of injustice. This results in confusion, disillusionment, and sometimes rebellion against divine order. Recognition of law requires sober observation and humble reflection on personal actions and their consequences. Understanding that law is impartial allows humans to see order in what appears chaotic, fostering alignment rather than resentment. Chapter 3. Law is human-made rules. A third widespread misconception is the confusion between divine law and human-made rules. Religion, society, and tradition have often presented man-made regulations, rituals, and moral codes as if they were the laws of God. Rituals, dogma, and externally imposed commandments can substitute for true recognition, giving the illusion of compliance without inner understanding. Many are taught to follow rules blindly, believing that obedience alone ensures alignment with law. This external authority becomes a crutch, replacing personal recognition and inner responsibility. The Grail Message clarifies that divine law operates within the individual, not merely through outward acts. True recognition cannot be delegated, it must arise from sober reflection, conscience, and alignment with the inherent order of creation. Human-made rules, while often useful for social harmony, are not the law itself and cannot substitute for awareness. When human beings mistake ritual for law, they risk spiritual stagnation, confusion, and dependence on authority. Liberation comes only when inner recognition replaces blind adherence, when the individual observes cause and effect, aligns thought, word, and deed, and lives in conscious obedience to the eternal, impartial laws of God. Part 2. The nature of God's laws. Chapter 4. Eternal and immutable. God's laws exist independently of humanity. They are not created by men, not influenced by desire or opinion, and not subject to negotiation. They are the eternal framework through which creation operates, holding every atom, every thought, and every action in precise balance. The Grail Message teaches that law is immutable. Human perception, emotion, or judgment cannot alter it. Attempts to manipulate, ignore, or reinterpret law do not change its effects. They only result in misalignment, confusion, and suffering. To recognize law correctly is to understand that it does not require human approval to function. It works continuously, impartially, and exactly, whether one is aware of it or not. Misconceptions arise when humans measure law against their wishes, interpreting outcomes as favorable or unjust, rather than seeing the impartial cause and effect at work. True alignment comes from acknowledging the unchanging nature of law, internalizing its principles, and observing its effects in daily life. Fear, desire, or personal bias must give way to sober recognition and humility before the eternal order. Chapter 5. Law is the structure of creation. God's laws are not abstract ideas or optional rules, they are the very structure of creation, governing both the physical and spiritual realms. Every effect, from the motion of planets to the growth of thought and character, follows the precise operation of law. Cause and effect form the central principle. Every action, intention, and word sets in motion forces that produce corresponding results. Order, harmony, and justice are not concepts to be debated, they are the living expression of law. Law creates stability, enables growth, and ensures the balance of existence. The Grail Message emphasizes that law is active, not passive. It does not wait for recognition, nor does it suspend operation based on human convenience. Its workings are constant, exact, and impartial. The alignment of humanity with this structure determines experience. Misalignment leads inevitably to correction, often experienced as suffering or disorder, while alignment brings peace, clarity, and freedom. Understanding law as the structure of creation allows humans to see reality as it is, rather than as it appears through the filter of emotion, desire, or assumption. Chapter 6. The Law and Human Responsibility. Every human action bears consequence. The Grail Message teaches that freedom is inseparable from responsibility. To act without recognition of law is to court inevitable correction. Law itself is neutral, it neither rewards nor punishes personally. Consequences are the natural outcome of alignment or misalignment. Recognition of law requires sober self-observation, reflection, and alignment of thought, word, and deed. Freedom is not the ability to act without restraint, it is the capacity to act consciously in harmony with the eternal order. Misunderstanding this principle leads to repeated mistakes, suffering, and spiritual blindness. Responsibility begins with honest acknowledgement of one's actions and their inevitable consequences. Each individual, by understanding the impartial nature of law, can consciously choose alignment, creating a life of clarity, order, and peace. Ignorance, denial, or delegation of responsibility to others leads to misalignment, but the law itself remains unwavering, impartial, and precise. The Grail Message emphasizes, true liberation, strength, and harmony come not from avoiding law, but from living in recognition of it, observing its operation, and acting consciously in accordance with its principles. Part 3. Human Limitations and Law. Chapter 7. Intellectual Obstacles. One of humanity's greatest barriers to recognizing God's laws is the intellect itself. Humans often confuse thinking with knowing, relying on cleverness and abstract reasoning rather than sober observation. While the intellect is a useful tool, it becomes an obstruction when it replaces inner recognition and perception of law. The Grail Message emphasizes that true understanding arises not from mental gymnastics or accumulation of knowledge, but from quiet reflection and careful observation of cause and effect. Intellectual pride leads many to question the impartiality of law, invent excuses, or attempt to rationalize deviations, rather than acknowledging alignment or misalignment. To overcome these obstacles, humans must distinguish between mental speculation and actual recognition of reality. Observation, sober reflection, and humility are essential. Recognizing law requires seeing beyond clever arguments, accepting facts as they are, and allowing inner understanding to arise. Only then can intellect serve as a support rather than a barrier. Chapter 8. Emotional and Moral Distortions. Human emotions, desire, attachment, aversion, often distort perception of law. People may pursue what feels good, avoid what feels unpleasant, or allow attachment to outcomes to cloud judgment. Similarly, moral bias can color observation, leading to judgment based on preference rather than recognition of law. The Grail Message teaches that law requires sober conscience, not emotional reasoning. Misguided feelings and subjective morality create false assessments of justice, fairness, and consequence. Emotional indulgence, whether in fear, hope, or anger, leads to misalignment and obscures the impartial operation of law. True alignment involves observing one's own inner states, separating feelings from recognition, and acting according to principle rather than preference. Emotional maturity and moral clarity are indispensable for seeing law as it is, not as one wishes it to be. Law is constant, impartial, and unaffected by human sentiment. Understanding it demands conscious sobriety and discernment. Chapter 9. Self-deception and avoidance. A further limitation is human self-deception. Pride, vanity, and rationalization enable avoidance of reality. Individuals create justifications, excuses, and false beliefs to shield themselves from recognizing misalignment with law. This blocks spiritual growth and perpetuates misunderstanding of cause and effect. The Grail Message emphasizes that honest self-examination is the gateway to true recognition. Avoiding responsibility or projecting blame prevents alignment and maintains suffering. Human pride resists correction because acknowledgement requires humility and courage. Breaking through self-deception requires sober, fearless introspection. The seeker must examine thoughts, words, and deeds objectively, identify misalignment, and take conscious steps toward correction. Recognition of truth liberates, while continued avoidance perpetuates error. The path to lawfulness lies in accepting responsibility, confronting illusions, and living consciously. Part 4. Applying God's Laws. Chapter 10. Thought, Word, and Deed. True application of God's laws begins within the human being, in the alignment of thought, word, and deed. Every inner thought carries potential to influence reality. Every spoken word initiates a chain of effect. Every action manifests alignment or misalignment with law. The Grail Message emphasizes that daily decisions are reflections of law. Small choices accumulate into patterns that determine harmony or disorder in life. Misalignment often originates in thought, where unchecked imagination, desire, or judgment distorts recognition. Words may then echo this distortion, and deeds bring consequences in the external world. Correcting inner disorder requires sober self-observation, recognition of misalignment, and deliberate adjustment of thoughts, words, and actions. Alignment is not achieved once, it is a continuous process. The human being must maintain vigilance, constantly observing inner states and outer consequences, using the faculties of reasoning, conscience, and reflection to ensure life flows in harmony with divine order. Chapter 11. Relationships and Community. God's laws are not only personal, they extend into relationships and community. Every interaction carries consequence, whether in family, society, or work. Recognition of law within relationships ensures respect, responsibility, and truth in human connection. The Grail Message teaches that collective alignment reflects individual awareness. When individuals act with responsibility and integrity, communities flourish. When misalignment prevails, disorder and suffering accumulate. Law governs all interactions impartially, producing consequences according to alignment, regardless of intention or belief. To live harmoniously in community, one must act consciously, honor agreements, and recognize the effect of one's behavior on others. Mutual alignment is strengthened by empathy informed by principle, not emotional preference. True human cooperation arises from sober recognition, not compulsion or habit, fostering a society where law functions visibly and harmoniously. Chapter 12. Destiny and Life Path. Human destiny is shaped through the conscious application, or neglect, of God's laws. Fate is not an arbitrary imposition, but a natural result of alignment or misalignment with law. Every decision, thought, and action contributes to the life course, creating patterns that manifest externally. The Grail Message clarifies that law provides framework, not predetermined fate. Humans retain freedom of choice, but choices have predictable consequences. Recognition of law enables conscious shaping of one's path, while neglect or avoidance leads to repeated difficulties and unintended outcomes. Awareness of law allows individuals to intervene in patterns early, correct misalignment, and consciously direct life's unfolding. Destiny becomes not a matter of chance but a reflection of recognition, responsibility, and active cooperation with the eternal order. By aligning inner states with law, humans achieve harmony, clarity, and peace, experiencing life as a structured expression of divine order. Part 5. The Light of Law. Chapter 13. Illumination through Recognition. The Grail Message emphasizes that God's laws serve as a revealer of truth. They illuminate what is real, exposing motives, intentions, and inner states. Misalignment, unconscious desire, and false belief cannot remain hidden when law operates. It continuously reflects the true condition of the human being. Recognition of this truth is enlightenment. It does not arise from fear, speculation, or external validation, but from sober observation of the natural consequences of one's actions. By acknowledging the illumination that law provides, the human being becomes aware of errors and distortions within thought, feeling, and action. Illumination through law is not a threat, it is a guiding light, showing the way toward alignment, clarity, and inner order. Acceptance of this revelation allows the seeker to step beyond self-deception and to perceive reality as it is, rather than as one wishes it to appear. Chapter 14. Correction and Growth. The Grail Message teaches that consequences of misalignment are not punishments, but instruments of correction and growth. Law works impartially. Each misalignment produces an effect that offers an opportunity for recognition, correction, and learning. Pain, difficulty, and disorder are therefore tools for spiritual and material growth. When understood correctly, they guide the human being toward awareness, showing where thought, word, or deed has deviated from law. Avoidance, denial, or fear, however, perpetuates misalignment and delays progress. True growth comes from acknowledging consequences without resistance, reflecting on inner and outer causes, and consciously adjusting behavior. By cooperating with the corrective function of law, humans align more fully with order, harmony, and justice, and develop strength, clarity, and responsibility. Chapter 15. Freedom and Deliverance. Recognition and alignment with God's laws bring freedom and deliverance. Misconceptions, fear, confusion, and spiritual blindness fall away when law is soberly observed and obeyed. The human being experiences inner strength, clarity, and peace, no longer driven by uncertainty or distorted desire. Deliverance is not granted externally, it is born of conscious recognition and application of law. To stand quietly in alignment with law is to stand in freedom, freedom from compulsion, from fear of consequences, and from internal chaos. True liberty is therefore inseparable from understanding and living in harmony with the eternal order. By standing quietly in recognition of law, humans access inner authority, stability, and security, while the light of law illuminates the path ahead, revealing opportunities for growth, correction, and purposeful living. Freedom is the natural outcome of clarity, alignment, and responsible cooperation with God's order. Part 6. Breaking Free from Misconceptions. Chapter 16. Religious Misconceptions. Humanity has long misunderstood God's laws through authority, ritual, and emotionalism. Religion often substitutes inner recognition with external obedience, relying on sacred texts, clergy, or ceremonies as intermediaries. This approach leads many to worship rules rather than understand law, creating fear-based devotion instead of conscious alignment. The Grail Message teaches that true recognition is internal. Rituals are valuable only when they support inner clarity, reflection, and conscious cooperation with law. Emotional excitement, without sober observation, produces illusion rather than enlightenment. Restoring purity in recognition requires the human being to look inward, differentiate between external forms and the reality of law, and seek understanding through sober observation and personal responsibility. Only then can religion serve its intended purpose, as a guide to alignment rather than a source of misperception or fear. Chapter 17. Social Misconceptions. Society reinforces misunderstandings of law through popular beliefs and collective assumptions. Cultural norms, traditions, and communal thinking often elevate convenience, preference, or social approval over lawful recognition. Humans conform to group expectations, mistaking consensus for correctness, thereby perpetuating misalignment. The Grail Message clarifies that law operates impartially, independent of opinion or popular acceptance. Collective ignorance does not alter cause and effect. Misalignment on a societal scale creates widespread suffering, yet many remain unaware because they judge by emotional preference rather than sober observation. Breaking free requires conscious independence, the courage to observe law for oneself, and the willingness to stand in truth, even if alone. Recognition of law must be personal and active. Societal approval cannot substitute for inner understanding. The human being must learn to distinguish conventional belief from lawful reality. Chapter 18. Personal Misconceptions. Self-deception is perhaps the most subtle and persistent barrier to alignment with God's laws. Humans create illusions, justifications, and excuses to avoid confronting misalignment. Pride, vanity, fear, and laziness maintain these illusions, preventing honest self-recognition. The Grail Message emphasizes that honest self-examination is the gateway to true alignment. Individuals must face their own errors without rationalization, observe consequences objectively, and take responsibility for thought, word, and deed. This requires courage, humility, and disciplined reflection. Only through sincere self-recognition can the human being correct misalignment, break the cycle of repeated errors, and consciously cooperate with divine order. Personal misconception is dispelled not through external teaching, but through the inner work of clarity, honesty, and observant alignment with law. Part 7. Living in the Laws of God. Chapter 19. Awareness in Daily Life. Living in accordance with God's laws begins with awareness in daily life. Every thought, word, and deed carries potential to align with or deviate from law. The Grail Message emphasizes that law is not abstract, it is practical and continuously active, reflecting the inner state of the human being in real-life circumstances. Sober observation is essential. Humans must monitor thoughts for hidden bias, intention, or desire, watch speech for distortion or exaggeration, and evaluate deeds for consistency with law. Daily correction, rather than grand gestures, ensures that alignment is gradual, continuous, and natural. Through conscious attention to each moment, the human being develops clarity, responsibility, and inner order, transforming ordinary life into a living expression of divine law. Awareness becomes the foundation of all spiritual and material stability, preparing one for the deeper application of law in relationships and destiny. Chapter 20. Relationships and Responsibility. God's laws extend beyond the individual, they govern interaction within relationships and communities. Respect, responsibility, and truthfulness are the pillars of lawful interaction. Misalignment in relationships produces conflict, misunderstanding, and collective disorder, while alignment fosters harmony, trust, and mutual growth. The Grail Message teaches that interaction aligned with law strengthens both social and spiritual bonds. Every choice in communication, cooperation, and service carries consequences, reflecting whether the human being observes law conscientiously. Responsibility is not enforced externally but understood internally, through recognition of cause and effect. To live lawfully in relationships, humans must cultivate empathy informed by principle, practice integrity in all dealings, and observe the effects of actions on others. This conscious approach ensures that human connections serve as expressions of divine order, rather than instruments of self-interest or illusion. Chapter 21. Destiny and Alignment. Human destiny is intimately connected with recognition and adherence to God's laws. Life paths are shaped not by chance but by consistent alignment or misalignment with law. Every decision, intention, and action contributes to the unfolding of circumstances that constitute personal destiny. The Grail Message clarifies that law provides the framework within which freedom and responsibility operate. Conscious cooperation with law allows humans to steer their life course, correct errors, and create harmony, whereas neglect or ignorance produces repetition of misalignment and unwanted outcomes. Alignment with law does not eliminate choice, it illuminates the path, clarifies consequence, and facilitates freedom through understanding. By recognizing the effects of law and acting in accordance with it, humans experience life as an integrated process of learning, growth, and fulfillment, harmonized with divine order. Part 8. Conclusion and Epilogue. God's laws are eternal and constant. The Grail Message makes clear that God's laws are unchanging, eternal, and independent of human opinion or desire. They exist as the immutable framework of creation, governing cause and effect in both spiritual and material realms. Misunderstanding, neglect, or fear cannot alter their operation. Humanity often attempts to bend or redefine law according to preference, emotion, or societal convention, but these efforts cannot change reality. True recognition of law comes not through coercion, ritual, or speculation, but through sober observation, inner clarity, and conscious alignment. Eternal laws are impartial. They reflect the true condition of the human being and provide the foundation for order, harmony, and justice. To live in accordance with them is to live securely within the structure of creation, free from illusion, confusion, and fear. Human responsibility for recognition and alignment. With awareness comes responsibility. Recognition of God's laws obliges the human being to observe, understand, and align with them in thought, word, and deed. Ignorance is forgivable only to the extent that effort is made to learn, reflect, and correct. The Grail Message emphasizes that freedom and well-being are not bestowed externally, they are earned through conscious cooperation with law. Each human action carries consequences, and responsibility lies in ensuring that choices are in harmony with the immutable principles of creation. Neglecting this responsibility leads to repeated error, confusion, and suffering. Acceptance, application, and continual self-observation allow the individual to live harmoniously within the laws, experience inner peace, and contribute to collective order. Awareness is the measure of freedom and life quality. True freedom is inseparable from awareness of God's laws. Ignorance, self-deception, and denial bind humanity to confusion and disorder, while sober recognition liberates. The Grail Message teaches that life quality, spiritual, emotional, and material, is directly linked to alignment with law. Awareness allows one to navigate choices responsibly, perceive consequences clearly, and respond with wisdom rather than impulse. The measure of freedom is therefore not external circumstances, but clarity, alignment, and conscious cooperation with divine order. A final call to earnest seekers. The path to recognition is open to all who approach it with earnestness, humility, and courage. False assumptions, societal pressures, and personal illusions can be overcome through sincere reflection, honest self-examination, and deliberate alignment with law. The Grail Message calls each seeker to observe carefully, correct continuously, and act responsibly. Spiritual growth, freedom, and fulfillment are the natural results of living in harmony with creation's laws. The effort required is internal, but the reward is clarity, stability, and inner strength. Living soberly, responsibly, and consciously within God's laws. To live in accordance with God's laws is to stand quietly, firmly, and responsibly in recognition of the framework that sustains all life. Daily attention, honest reflection, and conscious action are the means by which humans maintain alignment and receive the benefits of law. The Grail Message encourages sobriety of thought, responsibility in deed, and clarity in perception. Those who practice this do not merely survive, they flourish. They contribute to collective order, harmonize with spiritual law, and experience the liberating peace that comes from knowing and living within the eternal, unchanging principles of creation.